Hi there, this is Jimmy Roberts. You know, when it comes to the game of golf, there is no place on earth like the metropolitan area. It's always been a special place for the game of golf and also for golf writing. Some of the most esteemed and accomplished journalists covering the game work here. Now, you'll get a chance to hear them right here on the Metropolitan Golf Writers Association podcast. Enjoy.
My name is Gordon Andrew. I'm your podcast host for today. And today's guest is Damon Hack, legendary sports journalist and Golf Channel megastar. Welcome, Damon.
Thanks, Gordon. Quite the introduction. Definitely agree with at least the part that you got my name right. I don't know about the other stuff, but I'm definitely obliged. Thanks, my friend.
My first question to you, Damon, is how many podcasts have you been on?
Oh, wow. I would probably guess 30 or 40.
Yeah, at least. So I've listened to a number of them, and the challenge for me is asking you a question that you haven't been asked. So I'm going to try, and if I hit one that you've answered better at another podcast, you might want to say, you know what, refer to my 2020 interview with Riding with Righty at Myrtle Beach. Okay. I like to start with the backstory. And if you would oblige me and just talk a little bit about your background growing up in LA and family and influences and aspirations as a kid.
For sure. Yeah, grew up in the San Fernando Valley, the 818 area code, Van Nuys, Sherman Oaks. Born in 1971 to Charles and Catherine Hack, who were both fantastic people. My dad graduated from UCLA. My mom graduated from UC Berkeley. My dad, God rest his soul, was an attorney for many years, got a master's degree in business and a law degree. My mom still lives in the San Fernando Valley, is a marriage, family, and child counselor to this day. I'm nearly 80 years of age, and I have a little sister also, and then 3 half-siblings as well. I'm the oldest of the crew. Had a wonderful childhood. You know, my parents got divorced, which stunk, but I can honestly say that my parents were good people. I had a good childhood in that I always knew that education was going to be an important part of my life. And both my parents, I guess they got divorced when I was around 10 years old. So even living separately, there was no question I was going to go to college. There was no question I was going to consider graduate school. Thankfully did, got a master's in journalism in 1996 from Berkeley after graduating with a history degree from UCLA in 93. Always knew I wanted to be involved in sports. I knew that if I couldn't play for the Lakers, and my dream for being a basketball player died my sophomore year at UCLA, tried to walk onto the team, made it to the final 10 of that year's tryout, got cut. I still remember the 3 guys who beat me out, Lou Ritchie, Chris Kinney, and Dave Paulsell. It's like it was yesterday, even if we're now pushing some 30 plus years ago, that tryout back in like 1990. But even when I knew that I was going to be an NBA player, I loved education. I loved sports. I knew that growing up around the likes of Chick Hearn, who was a great Lakers play-by-play voice, Vin Scully, incredible Dodgers play-by-play voice. I had wonderful influences around me, people that I aspired to be like. Right, Gumbel, who was on the Today Show, and I just knew that I wanted to be involved in sports. So my first real big break, I would say, was out of graduate school. Got hired as an intern at the Sacramento Bee newspaper, covered preps in Sacramento State, and would occasionally get out to a 49ers game or an A's game or San Francisco Giants baseball game. And then 1 year in, I got asked if I would do the Niners beat, because no one else in the office wanted to do it. It was a time of the sports department where a lot of guys had already done that job and they didn't want to travel anymore. And I was young and eager. They gave me basically training camp to try out for the role as the Niners beat writer. And I did a good enough job where they said, okay, we want you to do this job full time. And I covered the Niners for 3 seasons. 97, 98, 99. They had Steve Young. They had Jerry Rice. Wonderful players, playoff team. Year 2000, got offered a job to cover the Knicks for Newsday. That brought me to the East Coast. Covered the Knicks for Newsday. Covered golf for Newsday. hired by the New York Times, covered golf in the NFL, covered, the Olympics in 2004 for the Times, watched the basketball team lose horribly, which led to the Redeem Team of 2008. Got hired by SI in 2007, covered golf in the spring and summer, football in the fall and winter. Discovered real quickly, Gordon, that I was happy in the spring and summer and not so happy in the fall and winter. I like covering golf better. Golf Channel offered me a job in 2012, and I've been at Golf Channel and NBC ever since, and it's been quite a fun ride. Got off the golf course this morning, in fact, just now. So I love the game. I'm average at best, but I feel like I'm in the employment that fits what I love to do, and that's to tell stories, interview players, and I love the game of golf.
Yeah. Where do you live in Stanford?
I live in Westport, Connecticut, so I'm a member at Aspetuck Valley, which is in Weston. A bit of a hilly, challenging East Coast golf course, thick, rough, fast greens. It was my first round of the year today, and I played like it. Actually hit the ball well off the tee, but no scoring around the greens to speak of.
Yeah. I'm actually, I raised my family in Fairfield, right down the road from you. I was a member at Brooklawn, which you probably played because you worked out of Trumbull with Sports Illustrated, right?
So I worked out of the city. I lived in the city, but I'm buddies with Scott Seymour, who's a longtime member at Brooklawn. Fantastic Tillinghast course, if I'm not
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Great
Tournament course. Let me back up a little bit. Why history as a major?
Yeah, I tried 2 majors before and they didn't take. I was a poli-sci major for a bit, I'm still interested in politics to this day, but I just didn't enjoy it the way I thought. Then I bopped over to Spanish my sophomore year, and the teacher was cracking jokes, and everyone in the classroom was laughing but me. So I was like, uh-oh, this might be a little bit above my head. And I've always been interested in history and, mostly American history. And that was kind of my focus, post-Civil War, Reconstruction, kind of that era. And I love to read. I think the long answers I just love, or the short answers I love to read. And I still read to this day. I read novels, I read historical fiction, I read sports books, golf books. I just love to read. So I think that was the main thing. I didn't mind having to sit in the library for a couple hours and read. So that was a big thing.
So, but then you got a master's in journalism. At what point in your life did you discover that you were a good writer?
It's funny. So I went to grad school, would have been 1994 to 1996. And before that, I'd worked at KMPC Radio, kind of cutting tape and answering calls and booking guests. And I went to journalism school completely bent on being a broadcaster. And when I got to J School at Berkeley, I found myself surrounded by a lot of professors who were alums of or writing for the New York Times, the LA Times, and the Washington Post. And I discovered that the hub of great journalism, whether you're on TV or radio or newspaper or magazine, is writing.
Yeah.
And so I needed to get better as a writer. And I fell in love with writing to the point where I thought once I left J School and started on a path of newspapers and magazines that I would ride that out forever. Then you saw what happened to newspapers, the news hole shrinking, advertising dollars shrinking, going elsewhere. And I got offered a buyout from Sports Illustrated at the same time I got offered a job at Golf Channel, which is why I made the shift to television. Thankfully, I feel like I'm okay at television, and it's been a good transition. But I'll tell you, Gordon, I covered the Masters this year. I was walking down Amen Corner on the Wednesday, which I like to do every year, kind of a personal tradition that I have getting ready for that year's tournament. And I kind of felt old writing pangs, and I missed writing, and I write 4 or 5 times a year. I've written for the Masters Journal, and every now and then I'll do a freelance piece for someone or golfchannel.com. But I kind of worked backwards because I always wanted to be a broadcaster at the beginning. Then I fell in love with writing and loved my time at the New York Times and Sports Illustrated. Wrote some, Sports Illustrated cover stories on Tiger, and covered 2 Super Bowls where you're up all night writing with an 8 a.m. deadline. Covered Trevor Immelman's Masters title in 2008. But the business has changed. It was changing then, and I'm lucky that I had some people at Golf Channel that thought I could do a good job in television, and I've been there ever since. But yeah, I fell into writing basically in journalism school. Loved it. Loved reading Dave Anderson, our late great colleague from the New York Times and Met Golf Writing. I would call him legacy, royalty, and was a great friend. And sitting next to him at the Masters tournament and NFL games, Giants, Jets, he was just someone that you could learn so much from. Absolute newspaper royalty and just a good man. Learning from him and being around the likes of wonderful writers at newspapers all over New York, Harvey Erickson and Bill Rhoden and Selena Roberts, and then befriending wonderful writers that are still working to this day, like Mark Cannizzaro of the New York Post, who is also a Jets columnist, NFL columnist, and one of the last remaining golf writers. Spent many great days and nights with him, and Hank Gola back when he was at the Daily News, and Mark Herman, who was at Newsday. And I mean, to live in New York City and be a newspaper guy for a long time, I think I hit the sweet spot. It was a great period. It was a wonderful time when newspapers were spending money and Tiger was winning and the golf beat was absolutely thriving. And clearly things changed, and that's kind of what pushed me toward the television medium.
Yeah. When you did that article for Sports Illustrated on Tiger, what did he allow you to interview him, or did you have to just work on research?
Yeah, if I recall, I did a Tiger cover story where he was coming back from injury and hadn't seen him all year. Pretty sure I was just interviewing people around him. If I had gotten him, it would have been maybe at a press conference or a group scrum. But Tiger, one-on-ones with Tiger were rare. I got him a couple of times. He treasured hard work. If you woke up early and followed him for a practice round at 6 a.m. or 6:30, he was bound to give you a few minutes. And I learned that early on the beat. Tiger, and a lot of golfers, David Duval is very similar, wanted you to be out there. If you were just asking Duval, for example, I'll never forget, he was coming back from the driver yips, and someone asked him a question about his round, and David said, well, were you out there? Were you following me? Even if he shot 78, he wanted you to be out there. He wanted you asking questions from things that you saw. So I learned early that guys like VJ, Tiger, and Duval, who necessarily didn't love talking to the media to begin with, if you were a hard worker like Doug Ferguson, the AP golf writer, covers everybody's out there early, walking practice rounds and pro-ams and walks 18 holes. If you're doing that, the players see you, they respect you, and they'll give you more things than they would if you're sitting in the press center or press tent for 5 or 6 hours. So yeah, that was the best way to get those guys. But that story, I think I probably just interviewed people around Tiger. I remember interviewing Nick O'Hearn because he was living at Howard at the time and had seen Tiger on the driving range and was able to tell me how he was looking in advance of his comeback. This would have been back in like early 2009, coming out of his win at the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines, missing the rest of that season, then coming back in 2009.
Yeah. Are there players who are notorious for not wanting to talk to journalists?
Oh, VJ was at the top of the list for me. I remember he was the number one player in the world. I was at the Times, and I went through his agent, Clark Jones, at the time, and I was like, I got to do a piece on VJ. The Times wants something on him. And he was like, okay, well, you can get him at Memorial. It was in advance of the U.S. Open. It might have been the Pinehurst 05 U.S. Open because he had beaten Tiger in 04 and had taken the number one ranking from him in 04 when VJ won 9 times. So, yeah, it would have been post 04 into 05. And I just remember being on the beat and having to chase VJ, and I said, your agent said I could talk to you. I remember following him one time after a round, and he kind of looked back at me and kept on walking. He just didn't want to talk. So I talked to his trainer, Joey D, talked to some other people around him. But I think he was one of those guys I ended up having to just get from transcripts, or he was just tough. Didn't like the media, didn't trust the media. Really ever since he got to the PGA Tour and after having some issues in Indonesia where he signed an incorrect scorecard. He never kind of got over that and was just carried that chip on his shoulder forever. Phil could be hot and cold, depend on the mood. I finally got past some early back and forth trouble with him and was able to talk to him from time to time. Tiger was tough. These guys, but for the most part, I find that most of the guys are not bad. You just got to show up. You have to be a familiar face, and you have to be someone that works hard and appreciates hard work. For the most part these days, I'm old now. I've been around for so long that most of the guys are like, I remember watching you on Morning Drive. Or I remember, you've been around long enough so they pity the old guy chasing them around with a microphone.
Right. Or, my dad really likes you. So that kind of compliment, right? So who's the most misunderstood player on the tour, do you think?
The most misunderstood player on tour, I think Scotty might be. People think he's dull. People think he's boring. Tell you what, I interviewed him after the first day of the President's Cup. He was playing with Russell Henley, and I've told this story on Golf Today. And he had beat Sung Jae Im and Tom Kim. They'd beat him 3-2. And so it's off of 16 green. They win. They shake hands. They're fist pumping. They are so pumped up. Now, usually I interview players. They go into the scorer's tent. They've got time to come down from the high or low that they're on. In this case, match ends, high fives. Tommy Roy, who's our great producer, is in my ear. Let's get him right away. And I watched Scotty. It was as if there was fire in his eyes. It was as if he had just come off of the field of battle, as it were. He needed to calm down a little bit. He wasn't ready to talk to me. He was so into this match that he had just played. He and Tom Kim had some back and forth, if you remember, on that Thursday. The U.S. wins that first day 5-0.
Yeah.
And Scotty was like almost hyperventilating. He just needed a few minutes. So Tommy's like, is he ready? And Scotty kind of hung behind his golf bag. And I was like, no, he's not ready. I think he's putting his phone away or something. And Scotty heard me say that. And he said, I'm not putting my phone away. And he was still in kind of like this fight or flight mode. And I was like, sorry. So finally, like 30 seconds lapsed. I say, okay, Tommy, he's ready. And they throw to me and I interview him. He was fine. But this guy is a hyper competitor. I describe him as the guy that nobody wants to guard in the YMCA basketball league. Yeah. He's going to elbow you in the chest. He's going to dive across you to get a loose ball. He is a fiery competitor, and I don't think he's boring at all. He's not necessarily the greatest interview subject. Okay. I enjoy talking to him, though. He's kind of a big nerd. Like, I asked him about the eclipse that happened. This must have been 2 years ago, maybe not 2 Masters ago. And he's like, oh, yeah, I watched the eclipse. I got pictures of it. I was in Augusta, but my friends were in Dallas. So they sent me some pictures of the eclipse from Dallas. And this is all off the air, but it was so cool. I was like, man, he's like, off the air or inside the ropes or outside the ropes. He's just kind of like he's just a good dad, a good dude. But inside the ropes, he's not playing for zeros. He's playing not for money. He wants to win and step on your chest. And he is an old school competitor who could have played with Hale Irwin and Lanny Watkins and Curtis Strange.
So based on that, you expect him to regain his form sometime soon, right?
I do. And to hear him describe how that injury, cutting his hand over Christmas, he called it a silly injury. And it really, as silly as it was, it interrupted his process. He is so process-oriented that his off-season reps were compromised. And he was not able to get ready the way that he wanted to. But I think it'd be the foolish person who thinks that Scotty's not going to find his form at some point very, very soon. And I love the fact that Rory's playing great golf. I love the fact that these Brahma Bulls, these alpha males are challenging Scotty. And now, you know what? Rory's gone from this underachiever over the last decade, this somehow disappointment to, wait a second, now he has 5 majors and the career Grand Slam. He went from heartbreak to this untouchable 6th player ever to complete the career Grand Slam. And now he's playing with house money.
Yeah, nothing else to prove.
Absolutely.
How severe was that injury through Scheffler's hand? Do you know, did he cut a tendon or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was severe enough to the point where he delayed his comeback. He wanted to come back early. He couldn't do it. I don't think it was to the point where it would change the way he has to play the game.
Yeah.
But it was enough to sideline him and take away some precious workout. And I mean, not just hitting golf balls, but lifting. He works out in the gym. He's got like that Golf Forever deal where he does a lot of stretching and strength work, and he's just extremely meticulous.
Yeah.
And coming off of a 9-win season, when you include the hero and the Olympic gold medal, 7 PGA Tour wins, the only player to go back-to-back in the Players, a second green jacket, he just wanted to run through the tape. There was nothing that was going to stop him from playing great golf early in 2025, but for a freak accident. That's exactly what it was, a freak accident.
Yeah. Let me jump back to your career path a minute, because it's pretty remarkable, I think. You start out paying dues at the Sacramento Bee, right? Probably being paid peanuts for close to nothing, right? So you paid your dues. Then you get an offer from Newsday, right?
Yes.
So that you moved to Long Island?
So I moved to Brooklyn, and here's how I think how life works. Really, the only reason I got offered that job was a columnist, Eileen Voisin, who was a sports columnist at the Sacramento Bee, knew the sports editor at Newsday, who was Steve Rowinski. Steve and Aileen spoke. Steve said, "Hey, you know any young writers who might be interested in coming out east to cover the Knicks for us?" Aileen tells me, my sister had moved to New York in '99. This was the year 2000. I'm like, okay, I'll fly to the East Coast and at least talk to Newsday, because I have people now on the East Coast, because I'd been a West Coast guy my whole life. And I'll never forget interviewing with Steve, flying home with a stack of Newsday newspapers and reading them on the flight home. I was like, this is different. This is some wonderful writing. Not that the Sacramento Bee didn't have wonderful writing, but I just felt that, whoa, this is Jimmy Breslin. This is different league. And he liked my clips. I sent him a bunch of clips, and I'd done a lot of game stories at that point, covering the 49ers. And they offered me a job, and I took it, and I was an East Coast guy. I have been an East Coast guy, either New York or Florida, ever since.
So is that when you met your wife?
It is. I met my wife in January of 2001 after several failed attempts at Match.com, which was a dating website. I'm not too shy to say it. I tell everybody. I was on that site and swinging and missing. Then finally, a buddy of mine from middle school, Matt Burke, set me up with my now wife, and he was dating someone at the time, and it was his girlfriend at the time, and then they ended up getting married. And they're like, hey, my friend, my friend Damon Hack, he's single, and his girlfriend Lisa knew Susanna, my now wife. We went on our first date and didn't have a great first date. We tell the story. It was almost like we were both very stiff and very, shy and not really engaging much. So I'll never forget walking her to the subway, and I'm thinking, well, this is not going to happen. And I said, you know what, though? We were set up by friends. We should go out again. So I called her up. I said, you want to go out again? And she said, sure. So we went out a second time. I'm almost thinking this is going to be the date where we say goodbye. Like, I just say, hey, we tried. Our guard is down. I'm cracking jokes that she somehow thinks are funny. And we had a wonderful date, a wonderful second date. And next thing you know, it's a wonderful third, fourth, and fifth date. And if not for that second date, we would have gone our separate ways. And I just felt like, let's just try this one more time. And I think it's because we both felt that this is not going anywhere. And we both just had a great time. It's one of those sliding doors moments.
And then the next thing you know, you have triplet sons, right?
Yeah.
So my question to you, really, how do you handle the diaper management with triplets?
Yeah, with great patience and a sense of humor, because the thing was, we had no children ahead of that. So I'd be like, oh my gosh, how do you deal with triplets? Like, well, this is all we know. We did have early nanny help, which is critical living in New York City.
Right.
But there was a time when we didn't have it, and my wife and I would be like, okay, one of us is on the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift, and the other is on the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift.
Right.
But other than that, it's all hands on deck. We got them sleep trained and got them somehow on some sort of a sleep schedule where it wasn't complete chaos. But honestly, it's all we knew, and we had to run it like the Army. And I think that tight ship has helped us even now, because they're 13-year-old boys, and I say this and I'm going to knock on some wood. They're still relatively sweet kids. Like, they don't hate us yet.
Yeah.
And I know that teenage energy is coming, but they're going to be 14 this summer. And so far, so good. They don't hate us. One of my sons right now is traveling with my wife. They went to Madrid to watch the Madrid Open.
Wow.
Tennis tournament. We've decided to start taking the boys on one-on-one trips. So now I've got to find a trip for one of my boys, because we usually travel as a fivesome, but we feel like we want to just get a little more one-on-one time. So they're having a great time in Madrid, and I'm going to take one of my boys either to Rome or the French Open or a basketball playoff game. It's nice to be in the sports business because you can knock on some doors and ask some questions from time to time.
Yeah. Now, did they play golf, your boys?
I have one son who loves to play golf. In fact, before my first round of today, we hit balls in the backyard. I've got these kind of like yellow golf balls that fly about a third of the way. They're soft. So I have like a makeshift backyard golf course. It's just a backyard, but he'll go back there and hit with me. And then he's the one that Reese, my middle triplet, who will try to play 4 or 5 times a year. I'd say it's tennis number 1 for all of my boys, basketball number 2. 2 of my boys just don't really love golf, but I got one golfer who has the bug and wants to play with me. And it's great. I love the time with him. It's just good one-on-one time, father and son time.
Yeah, I learned from my own son that you can't make somebody love the game.
Yeah.
It's got to appeal to them or not.
But they do watch. They love sports enough to the point where when Rory was doing his thing, they all wanted to watch. I was in Augusta, but my wife was texting me, and at that point, I was either back in the media center or on my way to Augusta Airport, because I had a flight that night. I was not on property, which bums me out now, but I had a flight that I had to catch. But they were captivated by that Augusta National Sunday, as so many are. I mean, the Masters, it transcends golf. It's like everybody's paying attention, even the loose golf fan.
That's right. Let me go back to your resume for a second. So you went from Newsday to the New York Times, which is like the epitome of journalism, really, right?
Yeah.
So why did you leave there?
Yeah, I loved it. I loved writing for the Times. Honestly, it was almost like SI was. I subscribed to SI as a kid. That was like That was a childhood dream, not to write for SI because I wanted to be a Chick Hearn or Vince Scully, but my heart pangs for SI were the kid that had Dr. J covers on my wall and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Magic Johnson Sports Illustrated covers on my wall. And I honestly felt that was the next challenge. I loved being the golf writer for the New York Times. It had great cachet. It was a wonderful challenge, but I felt that writing longer form pieces, which I ended up doing for SI, was an even harder challenge and a greater challenge. It's a challenge to have an hour or a half hour to write a story for the New York Times and turn it around real quick for NewYorkTimes.com. But to have to write a game story for that same Masters tournament or Super Bowl, which everybody has watched, which is not going to come out on Monday morning, but Wednesday afternoon or Thursday afternoon, arriving to somebody's mailbox, what can you bring to that reader that's different than what the newspaper guy or gal brought, and do it in 2,500 words and really challenge yourself to write scenes and capture the essence of it. That was a wonderful challenge that I loved and still miss. I miss that challenge of seeing Trevor Immelman, seeing his brother after the round, Mark, who's now a broadcaster, and making sure I interview Mark and what's Trevor's backstory and not just what he did on that Sunday,
right,
but what was it like growing up in Somerset, West South Africa with an older brother that you worshipped and that you end up being better than, and you're watching Seve in the middle of the night, and you're watching Olazabal, and you're watching Langer, and you're watching great South Africans like Ernie Els before you and Retief Goosen, and learning the backstory. I just loved that. It kind of played to my history major self, learning about the background of these players. So I love that challenge of writing even longer form journalism.
Now you took the buyout from Sports Illustrated. Is that when the Stars were? Had they been acquired at that point?
Yeah, they hadn't been acquired. Yeah, at that point, it would have been 2012. And I'll never forget, they'd already offered like a buyout or two, late 10 or 2011 also. And I went to the U.S. Open at Olympic Club 2012. Webb Simpson beats Jim Furyk and Graham McDowell. And at that point, I'd already had a lunch with Molly Solomon and Jeff Russell. Jeff was a longtime editor at Golf Digest, Golf World. Molly was at NBC. They were looking to launch and relaunch Morning Drive. So I had lunch separately with Jeff, coffee with Molly. They said, come to Florida after you cover this U.S. Open in San Francisco and sit across from Gary Williams. And I said, fine, I'll do it. And I did. Sat across, I flew Monday, so I sat across Tuesday through Friday on the Morning Drive set with Gary. Had an absolute blast. Loved it. It coincided with a time when Terry McDonald, who was our longtime editor at Sports Illustrated, had offered buyouts yet again to our group, our writing group. And I said, Terry, I think I'm going to, I got offered a job at Golf Channel. I think I'm going to take this job. He didn't even fight me on it. He just said, it's do it. It's fine. We will miss you. But they were looking to shed payroll. There's no doubt about it. So it was a good time. I got a buyout, and it was a good time to go.
Now, was Arnold Palmer still involved with that when you joined?
He was more ceremonial. At that time, NBC and Comcast had already taken over. Molly was a part of that. Mike McCarley was a part of that, who recently launched TGL in South Florida. Arnie still had a parking space, would still come by from time to time, but it was more ceremonial at that point. He was no longer running the day-to-day.
Yeah. I actually visited the Golf Channel headquarters when they were in Orlando, and they had his golf cart there with his bag. That was pretty interesting.
He was wonderful. I mean, I miss him to this day. He was an integral part of it. I'm not sure he would have moved to Connecticut had he been alive. I would have been curious what he would have thought. I mean, we moved here in 2020. He passed away in 2016, but he made you feel like 10 feet tall. He made you feel like the World Golf Hall of Fame member. That's for sure.
Yeah. Now, did you have to move your family down to Orlando? What was that like?
So we did. We moved it would have been 2012. So my boys would have been 14 months old.
Oh, the baby.
And so they don't remember living in New York City at all. My wife and I, we ended up settling in Winter Park, which is a wonderful suburb of Orlando. It's where Rollins College is. We fell in love with it. Senator Rita runs there. Yeah, okay. So, cheers.
Eastern Street.
Oh, terrific. Know it well. And we ended up loving Winter Park. So it was kind of like we were unsure about Orlando. I wouldn't say we went kicking and screaming. We were just unsure. Fell in love with it. Didn't want to leave. Ended up having to leave during COVID when Golf Channel relocated. And then now Westport's a terrific town. Boys are in good school, great school system, great golf, great restaurants. And we've just decided that we're kind of good wherever we go. We've got a good family. The boys listen, at least so far.
Yeah,
they're good students and good kids, and they're they're pretty amenable and flexible, which has been nice. When we had to leave Orlando, they were a little sad, but they're like a traveling pod, they're like their own play date,
So, what was more stressful for you, writing on a deadline or getting ready to interview somebody? It's different levels of stress.
Yeah, gosh. Yeah. I still think the writing was more stressful, but man, when you had the lead you liked, you were running downhill and it was great. Like, I'll never forget doing a Giants Super Bowl game story. It would have been the second Giants win over the Patriots. And I went to the post-game party and Eli's there and Peyton Manning was there. I got to interview both, and I captured the scene of them together. And Eli at that point had one more Super Bowl than Peyton, and Peyton was saying, people think I'd be jealous of my little brother. I want my little brother to win 5 Super Bowls, and I want to win 5 Super Bowls. And Archie I'd interviewed during the week, and had given me some great scenes from Eli taking the offensive line to dinner at St. Elmo's Steakhouse in Indianapolis on a Monday leading into the Super Bowl. So I was able to capture all these different scenes and put it all together. When you have a blank screen, that could be stressful. But when you've got the information and it's running downhill and it's flowing, and you see your name on that cover of SI. It's pretty darn cool. I love a good interview. I love great television. It's pretty satisfying. I don't know if it's as satisfying as having a byline in the New York Times. I still think in some ways the byline, underneath that masthead, I had cover stories on, A1 of the New York Times when Tiger beat DeMarco in 2005 with the chip in. Television, it's different. It's a high being on TV. I used to be nervous with the red light. Now it kind of fuels me. I enjoy it. It's a challenge in a different way. A great interview with Rory McIlroy, a great interview with Scotty, a great interview with Jordan Spieth. It sure feels good. Interviewed Keegan Bradley after he made the clinching putt at the President's Cup, Royal Montreal. That was a wonderful feeling. And he talked about we're going to copy what Jim Furyk did here and bring it to Bethpage for the Ryder Cup in 2025. And when you get a good interview, and I feel like the players they've been good to me. They're comfortable. They give me a lot of information. I feel like short questions lead to good answers. That's a great feeling as well.
Yeah. Do you think, since you haven't been doing long form writing in a while, that you've lost an edge? Would it be tough for you to write 2,500 words again?
I think so. Yeah. I think I'm writing 4 or 5 times a year is probably not enough. I still think I'm a good writer. I think there was a time where I felt like I was really good. I'm not going to be.
Other people thought so too, Dave.
Well, thanks, Gordon. That's nice. I've dipped my toe in different book projects and haven't been able to see one through. I have great respect for those who do. Hank Gold has written a couple of wonderful books.
Yeah. Is that one coming out on the Ryder Cup?
Ryder Cup, yes. I wrote a blurb for it, and he was like, "Man, that's so good," and I was like, "Thanks." So he's like, "You still got it, D-Hack. You still got it." So, I hope at some point before I go off to the big blue Dodger in the sky or wherever I end up as a Dodger fan and Laker fan, that I put my pen to paper and write a book on something sports related or wine related.
Are you ever going to finish that wine book that I've been reading about?
I do. I have a publisher who's interested. He just finished. I don't know if you know who Nicholas Callaway is. Nicholas is the son of the late Ely Callaway. He just finished this, what he told me was like a lifelong project on his father's memoirs and bio. That book has just come out. He says he wants to do a wine book with me, a wine and sports book. We just have to find the time to do it. Now that he's finished, we're supposed to play golf on Long Island this summer and figure a time to kind of collaborate and put something together. So I hope you saw. Yes, and drink some water and figure something out.
I know we only have 10 minutes left because I need to go pick up your boys. So earlier this year, you got the media award from the Advocates Professional Golf Association. And I'm not trying to make this a political discussion, but
yeah,
do you think that the pushback on DEI that's happening now on corporate level is going to affect golf ability to attract diverse audiences?
Yeah, I hope not. And I'm disappointed. And I know that, listen, I'm not going to get political. I know that Trump is a golfer. Obama was a golfer. I think that obviously having a golfer in the White House is good for golf.
Yeah.
I think when 2012 happened and we had the George Floyd summer and he was choked and killed and people saw it on video and that corporations said we're not doing something right. And I wrote a piece on being pulled over a number of times in my life. And people are like, what? Wait, you're on TV. How did you get pulled over? I'm like, well, I'm also a 6'3" bald-headed black dude living in the suburbs. And it happens. And I loved the conversations that we were having, and they were uncomfortable conversations from time to time. But I felt that as a country, we were making inroads and diversifying, and it was important. And I feel like the pushback, the rollback, it disappoints me on some level. I feel like we're going hard the other way now. Like, let's not talk about race at all, as if the playing field is level, and I don't think it is. And I say that as someone who I'm grateful for my life, grateful for my job, but I also know that there are those that have grown up in tougher circumstances than me because of a legacy of racism, and that there are housing projects in major cities in this country that were erected because blacks couldn't live in suburbs in St. Louis and suburbs of Chicago, and that white flight was a real thing. And I think we're better than we were in the 60s and 70s, but I still think that having those important conversations that uncomfortable are important and need to happen. Doesn't mean I know all the answers. Doesn't mean I'm right. So could disagree, and that's fine. And I have friends all across the political spectrum. But I do think that if we had gone too far, maybe if some people thought we'd gone too far one way, I think the pendulum is swinging too far, in my opinion, the other way, with absolutely shutting down DEI and removing books on Harriet Tubman from West Point libraries and Jackie Robinson. And I thought that's no good. Jackie Robinson is an American hero who served our country, let alone breaking down barriers in baseball.
Well, if the pendulum process is true, hopefully it'll swing back the other way.
I hope so. And I think, obviously, most people at the end of the day want health for their family and safety. And I think most people are good people. And I honestly mean that. I've traveled the world, traveled this country, have been treated exceedingly well in my role. And I just hope that people can continue to have conversations and not shy away from what has been a tough legacy in our country, a tough legacy in this sport, and also knowing that there have been wonderful strides that have been made as well.
Yeah. I just have a couple more questions, Damon. One is, has there been a person or a book or a poem or some mantra that guided your life or kept you headed in the right direction?
I think my late father, he always used to say, "Remember who you are." And it's one of my favorite lines, and it was adaptable. It was almost like, not like a pep talk, but it was like, okay, I'm applying to this job, or I'm applying to this college, or I'm going out into the world. And it was, remember who you are. And it was like, remember how you were raised, to be a good person, to be thoughtful, to be educated, to work hard. It's transferable to so many different areas in life. And he just used to tell me that when I was in college, going away for college, going away for grad school, remember who you are. And it basically was, I interpreted it as remember how you were raised, remember what you've accomplished. Don't let anybody sell you short or think you are less than. My parents were highly educated, and I grew up knowing that college was going to be a part of my future. And I love that I can say, oh yeah, I have a master's degree. Yes, I wrote for the New York Times. And I've earned it. I've earned everything that I've gotten. And I've also had wonderful mentors and great opportunities. But I just think, remember who you are. And I'll tell that to my boys as they get older. That's the mantra that I've followed. And I just think I get goosebumps thinking about my dad, and I wish he'd been around to see my kids grow up. And he passed away in 2018. And I miss him, and I think about him a lot. I'll never forget flying over to would have been Pyeongchang for that Winter Games, and he had passed away a couple of weeks before, and I was crying on the flight over. But I still dedicate a lot of my work and a lot of my life to his memory. And like all of us, we want to make our parents proud, no matter how old we get, Gordon. And that definitely applies to my life as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We just have one last question. For a younger person that's interested in going into sports journalism or any journalism, especially given what's going on in the industry, do you have any practical guidance for them?
I do. Ask a lot of questions. Read. Go on LinkedIn. Become an expert in your field. Become an expert in other fields. If you want to cover golf, read like crazy. Read Mark Frost. Read Frank DeFord, read Rick Riley, read Gary Smith. read, Dave Anderson, Herbert Warren Wind, study architecture, become an expert, become a person that when you go on a PGA Tour event, you're such a good reporter. Players and caddies come to you for information. Or become someone that is in the know. Become an expert. Love it, breathe it, and don't be shy to ask questions and to extend yourself and to be uncomfortable putting yourself out there. If you want to work for a television station, apply to 30 of them. Yeah. Write 50 station directors, and if you get 2 or 3 responses, you're going to be well on your way.
Yeah, that's great. I do have one more question, I lied.
Sure, with that time.
Is there a question that I haven't asked you that you'd like to answer, sir?
Yeah, I mean, you haven't asked me what kind of a golfer I am.
Well, this is funny because I tried to look up your handicap this morning, and it wouldn't let me in the Getting program to show me. But I've read that you're a 6.
A 6?
Yes, but I saw your swing on that riding with Reimer at Myrtle Beach, and I said, that doesn't look like a 6.
Yeah, put a 1 in front of that 6, and I'm a 16.7, I would say right now. I mean, it's May, and it's my first round of the year. That says all you need to know about how busy I am and how infrequently I get to play. And I've never been a 6, but I've also been listed at 5'9" or something on Wikipedia, and I'm 6'3". So you can't trust everything you read, but I'm definitely not a 6.
All right. Well, I've also read that you started playing golf at age 8, and I've read that you started as an adult. So what's the truth, 8 or an adult?
Adult. I started in graduate school, fell into a group of guys that purposely did not schedule classes on Friday so they could play golf. And I learned that in graduate school. Schedule your classes Monday through Thursday so you have an extra long weekend. So that's when I started playing mid to late 90s in graduate school. And when Tiger was just coming on the scene, that was kind of the perfect storm for me. Had some buddies that played, and Tiger, brought so many people who had never even picked up a club and had them, trying to figure out what that little white ball could do. What was that game all about? And I was definitely one of those guys.
Yeah. Well, listen, be proud of your 16. That's like you started that. Well, you weren't a country club kid, right?
This is true. Was not a country club. Definitely hard scrabble. Municipal golf was my entree to the game.
Yeah, me too. Hey, Damon, thanks for your time. It's a great interview, and hope to see you at one of the meetings.
Gordon, from Lauderdale County. Love being a part of the MGWA, and thank you so much for having me.
Our pleasure.